The early morning fog still lingered in the folds of the valley when Elijah Booker stepped off the Greyhound bus at the edge of Oak Ridge Hills. It had been 10 years since his boots had touched this soil, 10 long years of silence, absence, and planning. He stood there for a moment, drawing in the morning air that once smelled of red clay, wood smoke, and his father's pipe tobacco. But now it smelled different, cleaner, artificial, and tainted by something that didn't belong. A black SUV rolled past him, polished to a shine, tinted windows and chrome wheels catching the first rays of sunlight. A woman inside stared at him briefly, her expression unreadable, before looking away. Elijah adjusted the worn strap of his leather duffel on his shoulder and began the long walk down Millstone Road, the same road he used to bike as a child, the same road his father would walk to town every Saturday for fresh supplies. As he approached the crest of the hill, his eyes scanned the land he had once called home. And what he saw made him stop cold in his tracks. Where his family's two-story wooden farmhouse had stood for over a century, now rose a sleek glass hotel. It was enormous, a 5-story modern structure with gleaming metal beams, balconies lined with glass railings, and a massive swimming pool shimmering under the morning light. Guests in robes strolled lazily with cocktails in hand, and valets in pressed uniforms parked luxury cars near a roundabout fountain that spat water high into the air. The land had been wiped clean of its roots. The peach trees his grandmother planted. Gone. The old red barn with the tin roof. Replaced by a spa and wellness center. The pond where he and his brother had caught frogs and skipped stones. Turned into a landscaped koi pond, lined with LED lights and imported bamboo. It was as if his family had never existed. As if every drop of sweat, every memory, every story told under the stars had been erased. But Elijah didn't curse. He didn't weep. He just smiled. Because this was exactly what he had expected. A decade earlier, after the sudden death of his father, Elijah had faced the kind of grief that doesn't let you sleep. The kind that keeps you up, staring at the ceiling, wondering why some families got generational wealth and others got generational pain. The Oak Ridge Hills Homeowners Association had wasted no time moving in, sending letters, complaints, false accusations about improper land use, unsightly structures, even animal control violations for the chickens his father raised. But Elijah had been raised by a man who taught him how to play chess before he could ride a bike. So when the WA demanded he sell, when they sent their lawyers and even tried to change the zoning laws to make it illegal to run a farm on residential land, Elijah didn't argue. He didn't fight. He disappeared. He traveled, studied, and learned from indigenous farmers. The letter arrived at 8:32 a.m. It was handed over without ceremony by a quiet man in a gray uniform. The envelope was thick, heavy, and sealed in deep red wax that bore a symbol none of them recognized, a tree growing from a book. Karen Whitaker accepted it with an annoyed sigh, assuming it was another fundraiser or a petition from the neighborhood's historical society begging to name a bench after some retired librarian. She didn't even open it right away. She left it on her desk and continued with her morning staff meeting, where she talked about the new garden expansion and potential investor visits. Her assistant, Naomi, reminded her that a news crew would be arriving later to shoot a promotional video for a documentary on urban revitalization. It was a good morning. Until it wasn't. It started with a knock at her office door around 9:15 a.m. Naomi stepped in, holding her phone awkwardly. "Karen," she said carefully, "you need to see this." The video showed up first on a small community news site, the kind no one took seriously. It was titled, "The Legal Ownership Battle That Could Bring Down Oak Ridge's Grand Hotel." But within 15 minutes, the local newspaper had picked it up. Then the regional station. Then the phone calls started coming in, lawyers, board members, sponsors. Finally, Karen opened the letter. As she read, her skin turned pale beneath her makeup. She read it again. Then a third time, slower now, as if the words would somehow change. They didn't. The notice was clear, precise, and merciless. The letter detailed that the entirety of the land the Whitaker Grand was built on belonged to the Booker Family Land Trust. The development of the hotel, spa, and commercial buildings were in direct violation of the covenants outlined in the original land trust, which was still active and legally recognized. The HOA's acquisition was illegitimate, their permits invalid, and worst of all, they had constructed a multi-million-dollar property on stolen ground. And the trust had already been awarded temporary ownership pending full court review. Karen dropped into her leather chair, unable to speak for several long moments. "How?" she whispered. "How is this even possible?" She had been sure the land was abandoned. She remembered Elijah Booker, the last heir. Quiet, angry, uncooperative. But he had disappeared, vanished into the wind. No contact, no taxes, no objections. The county registry had listed the parcel as inactive. They had been told by their own legal team that it was safe. She had pushed the board to greenlight the project, convinced it was a golden opportunity. And now everything they'd built, everything she had staked her legacy on, was at risk of being seized. Across town, Elijah sat in a cafe just off Main Street, sipping black coffee and watching the chaos unfold on his laptop. He had no PR team, no press agent, just a single lawyer, a friend from school, who'd filed everything quietly and correctly. The trust documents were airtight, recorded in 2 states and federally notarized. He hadn't needed revenge. He needed precision. He watched the live stream as Karen appeared in front of reporters outside the hotel. Her voice shook slightly as she claimed there had been confusion regarding the title, and that her legal team was investigating the matter. She ended the statement quickly, then ducked back inside, clearly shaken. Elijah closed the laptop and finished his coffee. Then he stood, left a 20 on the table, and walked out into the heat of the day. He went straight to the courthouse. The hearing wasn't for another week, but he wanted to make his presence known. The clerk recognized him, not because she knew who he was, but because she'd seen his name in the filings that morning. She handed him a copy of the court calendar and gave a quiet nod of respect. In the hallway, a young woman approached him. She was black, maybe early 20s, with a notepad and a camera slung over her shoulder. "Mr. Booker?" she asked. He stopped, nodded. "My name's Jasmine. I'm a journalism student. My grandfather used to tell me stories about this land, how your family fed half the town with your farm, even when people couldn't pay. He said your daddy was one of the only folks who never turned a hungry man away." Elijah's eyes softened. "I remember your grandfather," he said. "Used to trade fresh fish for sweet potatoes." She smiled. "I just want to thank you," she said, voice full of quiet admiration. "For coming back. For not letting them erase what was here." Elijah nodded. He didn't need applause. But the acknowledgement mattered. Later that evening, the legal documents Elijah had filed began to ripple through the financial veins of the city. Investors called emergency meetings. The WA board fractured into arguments. The hotel's general manager resigned suddenly, citing ethical concerns. And several local business owners, who had been ignored or priced out by the HOA's aggressive development, began speaking up, sharing stories of pressure tactics, closed-door deals, and discriminatory practices. The news anchors, once glowing in praise of Karen Whitaker's vision, now spoke of controversy, possible land fraud, and a dramatic legal reversal. But Elijah wasn't watching anymore. He was back at the old southern field, standing once again near the family graves. This time, he had brought papers of his own, not legal ones, but hand-drawn sketches, farm layouts, blueprints. Plans for rebuilding, not a hotel, not a resort, but a place where people could come to learn, grow, and reconnect with the land. A community agricultural center, open to all, with programs for young farmers, especially those whose families had been displaced or cut out of the land-owning system. He had already secured funding, small grants, private donors, even a foundation overseas. The irony was that the hotel's rise had brought so much attention that Elijah's return became a lightning rod for land justice. People from around the country reached out, offering support, land law expertise, and fundraising ideas. He didn't just want the land back. He wanted to make it matter again. Meanwhile, inside the HOA's legal chambers, panic reached a boil. Their lawyers couldn't find any errors in the trust documents. Every page was legitimate, every detail perfect. The deed had never changed hands, it had been held in limbo by the trust, immune to sale or foreclosure. Even the permits they had secured from the city were based on incorrect assumptions. One board member threatened to resign unless Karen stepped down. Another demanded they try to settle. But there was nothing to offer, the land was no longer theirs to negotiate with. By the time the hearing date arrived, Elijah walked into the courthouse not as a ghost, but as a presence. The room was packed. Reporters, lawyers, townspeople. Karen sat stiffly beside her attorneys, her eyes avoiding the camera lenses. The judge was efficient and unsentimental. She reviewed the documentation, asked a few brief questions, and then turned to the room. In reviewing the filed trust documents and property deeds, it is clear that the development in question occurred without legal authority. Accordingly, ownership of the property and any associated structures will revert to the beneficiary of the Booker Family Land Trust, effective immediately. There was silence. Then, a buzz of voices. Murmurs. Cameras clicking. Elijah stood quietly. He didn't smile. He didn't raise a fist. He simply bowed his head, folded the documents, and walked out the courthouse doors into the sunlight. Justice didn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it arrived as a quiet return, and a reckoning years in the making. As he stepped into the parking lot, Jasmine was waiting for him. "What now?" she asked. He looked out toward the horizon. "Now," he said, "we grow something real."